Okay, it is officially official now. Vic Fangio is the new defensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins. After a lot of starts and stops, a lot of confusion, a lot of panic among Dolphins fans wondering, okay, Fangio, he's agreeing to terms to be the Dolphins defensive coordinator. Now is he backing out? There's some confusion. Well, it turns out that Fangio is just going to be in a consulting role for the Philadelphia Eagles during the Super Bowl, and so that put some complications, a wrench into into how long this was going to be until it was made official. But as of Wednesday afternoon, the Dolphins are tweeting it out. It's official now. Vic Fangio is the new defensive coordinator. Of course, he replaces Josh Boyer, who last year was exposed as a defensive coordinator in many respects. He blitzed too much. Dolphins, they ranked 15th in defensive DVOA last season after many strong years under Brian Flores, and they were 24th in points allowed. So Fangio comes to Miami with the simple task of improving Miami's defense. We'll get to his track record for 1 year leaps as a defensive coach here in a second. But the big thing that I want to ask is, can Vic Fangio turn the Dolphins unit into a top 10 group? So let's see where the Dolphins were last year. Like I said, 15th in defensive DVOA, 24th, excuse me, in points allowed. The biggest difference between the Boyer defense and the Fangio defense is just everything. Basically, like these two coordinators, it feels like they could not be more different, right? Josh Boyer had some success during the Brian Flores years, but like I said, in his first year under Mike McDaniel, sort of just being in charge of the defense, he really struggled. He blitzed more than he probably should have, considering the injuries to the secondary, leaving guys on islands and man coverage. Considering that the Dolphins traded for Bradley Chubb in the middle of the year, and then that was supposed to fix their pass rush, and yet Boyer just kept on blitzing, kept on blitzing, kept on blitzing, leaving his secondary open to getting beat deep, and they were beat deep quite a bit. And then you saw how Miami's defense plummeted. Fangio's defense is completely different. You know, Boyer is gonna it's a lot of cover zero, it's a lot of send the house, it's a lot of man coverage on the perimeter. Fangio is basically zone, right? He's mostly a zone coverage guy, relies on his front seven to try to get pressure. Instead of blitzing a lot, he likes to scheme up different advantages, tries to get his edge rushers isolated and in advantageous positions so that they can just do their job and go to work. And so these defenses are going to look very, very, very different. Now, quick note on Vic Fangio. This is one of the most respected defensive coaches in the league and has been across the NFL for the last 20 years, right? I mean, you look at his track record, his defense is ranked in the top 10 in scoring defense 10 times over the last 22 seasons as a defensive coordinator or a head coach. It's been in the top half of the league 13 times. You look at the DVOA stats, the defensive DVOA stats, 8 of the last 11 years, his defenses have ranked in the top half of the league. And then 4 of those years, his defense ranked in the top 5 in the league. That includes stops in San Francisco and Chicago as defensive coordinators. This is over the last 10 years again. And then he was the head coach for the Denver Broncos for 3 years. And they had a top half of the league defense. And then last year, obviously, got the call from the Philadelphia Eagles to try to help them win a Super Bowl. And by the way, his defense played pretty well in the first half until Patrick Mahomes happened in the second half. So that's where Fangio kind of is going to change things. Just aesthetically, right away, it's going to look a lot different. A lot different. The other part is that with the zone and fewer blitzes, that should put Miami's secondary in a better position to not just cover their dudes and not give up big plays down the field, but also maybe create a few more takeaways. The Dolphins ranked 4th worst in the league in interceptions last year, just 8 interceptions all season long, second to last, 31st in total takeaways. So Fangio should help also in that regard. It is a little bit more of a conservative defense. And if you look over the years, Fangio, in terms of takeaways, his defenses vary every single year. And by the way, takeaways kind of do anyway. They're a very high variance stat, but it's conservative in that he's not blitzing and not blitzing as much. And Josh Boyer wanted to blitz in order to create those turnovers. And that was largely what happened under Flores. It just didn't happen last year. And so I do think some of the stuff against Boyer was a little overblown, considering that, again, the takeaways tend to be a high variance stat. But when you consider also the injuries that the Dolphins were dealing with, then the lack of adjustments was pretty inexcusable, and I guess in the end was a fireable offense. But with Fangio, if guys get back healthy and the increased amount of zone, some guys are going to benefit that from that, and some guys aren't. So let's just go through some of the players really quick. The key players on Miami's defense that could be impacted by the change in defensive coordinator. So first one, Xavier Howard, bad year last year, was dealing with a groin injury, gave up a higher completion percentage than he has at any other point in the season, and he's going to be turning 30 years old. So you couple the injury history with the fact that he's going to be a little bit older now, and look, last year when he was out there was a lot of responsibility on him to guard the best receiver on the and one-on-one, and it was tough for him. But the thing with Xavier Howard is that he's got great route recognition. He's got some of the best hands in the league for a cornerback, and so I actually think the increased amount of zone could help him. Right, he's not going to have to stick with the best receiver every single afternoon now. It'll be more often him just settling back into his zone on the field and just reading the offense, which is something he is so good at and really good at being opportunistic. And so Xavier Howard, a guy who's known to be able to create turnovers and get interceptions, wasn't doing that last year at the same clip. This defense should actually be better for him, and he can kind of maybe find sort of a second act to his career after being one of the best man-to-man corners in the league over the last few seasons before last year. Could this zone defense kind of unlock a new version, a second act of Xavier Howard? That's something to watch. There's Brandon Jones, of course, the safety for the Dolphins. Vic Fangio likes to play sort of a two deep shell, right? Keep your safeties back to prevent the big play downfield. So that's going to be sort of more of what Brandon Jones is supposed to do. And Javon Holland, by the way. But talking about Brandon Jones, he's more of sort of a blitz safety, a tackling guy, more of a physical kind of player. Did struggle at times in coverage earlier in his year, but didn't earlier in his career, excuse me. But did show some improvement last year in terms of coverage before he got hurt, obviously in Week 7. But he went from allowing an 82% completion rate 2 years ago to 62% last year. So that's a pretty good improvement. Now, again, it was in a smaller sample because he was hurt for most of the season. But if he could keep progressing and keep developing in coverage, then he should be really good for this, because not only is the two deep shell going to test his coverage skills, but because he's such a quality tackler, that's also one of these things that are important for a two deep shell safety to have is, hey, like, even if you do give up the downfield catch, are you going to make a play on the ball? Are you going to stop this receiver from gaining more yards after the catch, maybe running for a touchdown or something like that after the catch? No, Brandon Jones, as long as he's back there, if he does give up the catch, he's somebody that should be able to make those open field tackles. So he could be really good. And then kind of ditto for Javon Holland, another physical safety who should also be tested and given an opportunity here in this new defense. And then there's Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. Look, Bradley Chubb had his best years in Denver. He went to the Pro Bowl in 2020 in Fangio's defense. Jalen Phillips only continues to get better. Like I said earlier, Fangio is going to put a lot of pressure on his edge rushers to get pressure one-on-one, right? He's gonna scheme it up so that it gets them in advantageous positions, so that opposing offensive lines don't really know where they're going to line up or what they're going to do after the snap and things like that. So Chubb and Phillips should kind of be unleashed a little bit here, where under Josh Boyer, it was just blitz, blitz, blitz. Let's just try to get as much pressure with as many bodies as possible, where Fangio is going to say, hey, you guys are hired to this team. Your job, Chubb and Phillips, is to get pressure. That's your job, is to create pressure on the edge. And so he's going to ask them to do that. And like I said, Chubb has one of the better, has one of the best pass rush win rates in the league, and did when the Dolphins acquired him midseason before the trade deadline. And then for Phillips, he just continues to get better. So he should be unleashed a little bit here in this new defense. Whether or not he could turn the Dolphins defense into a top 10 unit. Here's a look at what he's done in the first year after taking over new defenses over the past 10 years in his career. So from 2010 to 2011, here's the San Francisco 49ers. So Fangio hired to take over in 2011. The year before that, the Niners ranked 16th in points allowed. in the NFL. In Fangio's first year with the 49ers, they went from 16th to 2nd in points allowed. That's a big leap. Second's really good. Let's go to his next job in Chicago. In 2014, the Bears ranked 31st in points allowed. The next year, first year under Fangio, 20th. So they go from 31st to 20th. That's a huge leap. And then in 2018, the Denver Broncos went from 13th. They ranked 13th in points allowed. And then in 2019, Fangio's first year as the head coach of the Denver Broncos, they went from 13th to 10th. So not necessarily as huge a leap, but they were also working from a position of advantage. They were still top half of the league in defense in points allowed, but they went from above average to top 10 and still made a leap. So every time Fangio takes over a new defense, they get better, they improve in points allowed. So look, this is a guy who has a track record of improving defenses right away. This is going to be shocking to the Dolphins defense, to its players. There's going to be quite a bit of things that can change here if some of these players aren't cut out for more of a zone type of defense, more of a conservative defense, the way that Fangio is going to play. Then the Dolphins will have to look elsewhere for help. But I do think that there's quite a few players on this defense that are already ready-made, because if you consider the fact why Josh Boyer got fired, it was because he wasn't adjusting to his personnel. And so that kind of leads you to think, well, if Boyer's defense wasn't right for this personnel, then Fangio's probably will be, because they're so drastically different. So it's going to look really different. Hopefully the results are different too for the Miami Dolphins.